More than ever, the heart of a new Middle East beats on I-24 News.
Hello and welcome. You're watching Middle East Now on I-24 News. Our headlines this hour. Dozens of Democratic lawmakers boycott Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's speech to Congress. Israeli negotiators head to Cairo amid reports the Egyptians are softening their position on IDF control of the Philadelphia corridor. And Sudan's RSF militia says it's ready to take part in US brokered talks aimed at ending a war that has killed tens of thousands of people. First, though, Israel's control of the Philadelphia corridor, which borders Egypt, could be one of the main sticking points in a potential hostage release and ceasefire deal between Israel and Hamas. There are reports that Egypt is softening its position on the issue. More on that with a senior Egyptian diplomat in a moment. But Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is set to address the US Congress in a couple of hours, while his teams head to Cairo. They're also set to go to Qatar, but have delayed their departure for the latest round of negotiations. It is another agonising wait for the families of the hostages. And now Zach Andrews joins us now from Hostage Square in Tel Aviv. Zach, is it fair to say that the hostage families have been somewhat divided over whether or not they want Prime Minister Netanyahu to address the Congress tonight?
Yeah, just a quick change of location. We're in Dizengoff Square, which is very much a circle, but still. Dizengoff Square, where the march is going to begin, and then we'll be in Hostage Square in about a half hour, and that's where the screens are set up. And we're going to watch with the crowd Netanyahu's speech. The families are set to be there, and to that point, the families are very split. I would say, I say split because I watch the Israeli channels, and I see some different discourse. There are some families that are still supportive a bit of any of these efforts, but the families that I've spoken to over the last several months, every single time I speak to a family member, it's very clear that they want this deal now, and that some of them are very vocal about how they believe Netanyahu is and has been an obstacle to a deal, especially lately. That rhetoric has stepped up considerably within the last several weeks, and knowing that potentially a deal could be close to the finish line. There's a lot of nervous people, a lot of nervous family members, especially the ones that I've spoken to in the last week, very worried about the contents of this speech, knowing that he left Israel. They didn't want to see him go without a deal done, and he did anyways. So now they're very nervous about what will be said tonight. They're going to be paying very close attention. This crowd here is starting to grow a bit, and the expectation is that we're going to walk about half an hour and then reach Hostage Square in front of the Curia, and at that moment, the speech will be played on those big screens, and everyone is, no one knows what the contents of the speech. No one knows what he's going to say. Obviously, there's been some speculation that he's going to have some very pointed comments towards Iran. That's expected. But what is he going to say about the hostage families, about this deal? That's the big question tonight. That's what everyone here is very concerned about. And, of course, they're calling, as they have been, most nights, for a deal to be done now. They want to see a deal done now.
Zach, thank you very much. Zach Andrews there. And of course, here on I24 News, we will bring you that speech by Benjamin Netanyahu to the US Congress. Let me introduce to you my studio guest this hour. Shiri Fine-Grossman is a member of Forum Dvorah, Women in Foreign Policy and National Security, and she's the former head of regional affairs at the Israel National Security Council. Thanks for being with us, Shiri. So we heard what Zach has been hearing from the hostage families. What do you think? Do you think Prime Minister Netanyahu should be addressing Congress tonight, given what's going on with the hostage negotiations?
My opinion is that, there could be a better timing, and I'm not sure what the value is. It's obvious the main value of it is to, boost his image within the Israeli crowd. I don't think how much it will affect the Israel narrative in Congress or in the American people, where their attention is now elsewhere, and both the political attention is elsewhere with what latest developments in the U.S. With the presidential election. So, I think there could be better uses of his time. And especially when this hostage deal is getting into very critical stages, I wish he would be in Israel and not in front of Congress right now. We'll see what he has to say. If I have to bet, he's probably going to put the blame on Hamas and Sinwar for postponing the deal and not taking what's on the table.
Well, what do you make of this? The Israeli team will not travel to Qatar tomorrow. They're delaying their departure. That's according to an Israeli official, an Israeli source, who says the reason for that delay is due to the meeting between Prime Minister Netanyahu and President Biden.
Saw that report. There are some conflicting reports whether the reasons are actually internal disagreements between inside the Israeli cabinet and staff, or is it due to the Biden-Netanyahu meeting? I really don't know. There's really more that we don't know than what we do know. We know there is a lot of military pressure inflicted right now in Gaza, trying to get the best deal at hand. We know, like Zach said, there's great disagreements within the families, because a lot of the families are saying, and rightly so, I can understand their point, that let's give them, free them all in one swing, not just
piecemeal.
Yeah, not the way this is done, and that Hamas will break the deal and disappoint, and they won't see their loved ones again, and then it's a tough position to be in.
And just briefly, there is another report which says that Egypt is softening its position on Israeli control of the Philadelphia corridor. That could be key to the negotiations.
Look, the deal that the Biden administration put out, it was before Israel took control of Rafah, so that wasn't even on the table, but it did, in some way it is, because Hamas is insisting that Israel withdraws from all of Gaza. Rafah has become an important point. The report are talking about Israeli sources that are talking about possibly a softening from the Egyptian side. So we really don't know. It could be just kind of this testing that the Israeli side is doing. We'll have to wait and see.
All right, well, let's get the Egyptian perspective. Thank you, Shiri. Let's get the Egyptian perspective on that very crucial issue of the Philadelphia corridor and the Rafah crossing, and whether Israel will keep control of them. We're joined by Hossein Kamel Haredi. He's the former assistant to the Egyptian foreign minister, and he's the former director of the Department of Israeli Affairs at the Egyptian Foreign Ministry. Good to see you again, Mr. Haredi. Thank you very much for being with us. So give me your thoughts then on these reports. Is Cairo softening its position on whether or not Israel can control the Philadelphia corridor and stop Hamas from rearming?
I'm not sure, madam, that these reports are 100% accurate. The position of Egypt since last May 7th, the date when the Israeli army started its military attacks against Rafah, is that Egypt rejects the control of Israel of the Philadelphia road, as well as the Palestinian side of the Rafah crossing. I doubt very much if Egypt has softened its position on these two crucial fronts. But definitely, in the context of the ongoing negotiations, the ongoing mediation in order to reach a ceasefire agreement between Hamas and Israel in Gaza, I guess Egypt is willing to discuss any options, any solutions in order to get this deal approved by the concerned parties. Having said that, Egypt believes that ultimately Gaza should be run by the Palestinians themselves, and all the crossings between Gaza and the outside world, including the Rafah crossing, would be managed along the previous agreement of 2005, whereby there were European observers with Palestinians manning these posts, these crossings.
Okay.
So I guess this is the Egyptian position till today, madam.
I'm wondering, what are your thoughts? Because you said that Egypt insists that the Palestinians must control Gaza in the future. What are your thoughts on those recent comments by the Emirati envoy to the United Nations, Lana Nuseibeh? She gave an interview to Britain's FT, and she said that the UAE would be willing, if invited by the Palestinian Authority, to assist in governing Gaza. What would Egypt's position be on that?
I really don't know what she means by assisting in running or governing Gaza. The Egyptian point of view has always been, and I think will remain, so that the Palestinians are the ones who should be entrusted with running the Gaza Strip. Having said that, of course, there will be a transition once the Israeli forces would withdraw completely from the Gaza Strip. There would be a transition. What are the measures that would be agreed by the international community and the Palestinian National Authority on the nature and the duration of these measures remain to be seen. Maybe this would be the context in which some Arab countries would be willing, based on a prior acceptance by the Palestinians. Some Arab countries would be willing to take part in these transitional stage. As far as Egypt is concerned, I doubt very much, and this is my personal opinion, madam, please. I doubt very much if Egypt would, in any capacity, would be willing to participate in such measures. Of course, we'll be willing to train Palestinian security forces, but short of that, more than that, I doubt very much that Egypt would be willing or ready to send forces, to send soldiers, to send administrators to run the Gaza Strip. We believe that the Palestinians should be the ones who run the Gaza Strip, and the ones who should take responsibility of the borders of the Gaza with Egypt and with Israel.
All right, Hussein Kamel Haredi, we appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, madam. Thank you.
And Sharifan Grossman is here with me in the studio. Your thoughts on what you just heard?
Well, I'm not surprised. I don't think that even if there's a change in position, that they're willing to consider, a softening of their approach, it won't be made public. They won't speak about it. They won't admit it. If any agreements could be made, any understanding, that would be, I think, a better word. It will be done quietly, and it's kind of this culture in the Middle East. So I've told you, I kind of put a question mark on that report. But I think we should. This is the whole debate is kind of this old debate. And I think if we learned anything from what happened on October 7th, is the incitement, is the education, is the corruption. These are the things that we should, deal with. I don't care who's on the Palestinian side running the show. I care what they teach their children, because what happened on October 7th is a result of this demonizing of Jewish people and Israeli people.
Well, yesterday.
Otherwise, how would you do that? How would you burn entire families?
It could take many, many years. But yesterday, of course, the Fatah signed a deal in China with Hamas. Both sides afterwards told I-24 News that the deal was meaningless, but still it shows that they're not willing to separate themselves completely from Hamas at this stage?
Again, it's not about whether it's Hamas or it's Fatah or whoever it is. It's Salam Fayyad. It doesn't matter. It matters how do we move forward from here. I mean, we've seen, things in Rwanda that took place, genocide that took place in other. For us, it's October 7 was a genocide, and it wouldn't have happened if the people in Gaza weren't taught this, and the people in the West Bank are being taught the same. It's the same UNRWA schools in Jordan as well. We had numerous accounts here over the last few months about the education system and the school books, and I think we can't let this go, Laura, the day after. When you talk about the day after, we can't let this go. And I think the agreement, I mean, a lot of Palestinians would look at this agreement between Fatah and Hamas with a lot of cynicism. I mean, who's really acting as a leader of the Palestinian people and taking them to a better future?
All right, Sherry, for now, thank you very much. Well, in a couple of hours, Israel's Prime Minister will address the US Congress in Washington, D.C. Dozens of Democrats have already said they will boycott the speech. Our senior correspondent, Bianca Zanini, has the latest.
Bring them home now!
Protests outside the U.S. Capitol in Washington leading up to Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's speech to Congress Wednesday evening. Family members of hostages still being held in Gaza calling for a deal to bring them home now.
We need this world to be a better world for everybody, for the people in Gaza that are good, for the people in Israel that are good. We need to stop this war. I'm begging Bibi, help. We need the 120 hostages out. Thank you.
It's been nearly 300 days of war. Netanyahu's visit to Washington comes at a crucial moment, with a potential ceasefire for hostages deal between Israel and Hamas gaining momentum. At a meeting Monday evening with families of hostages, Netanyahu struck a positive tone.
We are determined to bring them all back. The conditions to bring them back are ripening, for the simple reason that we are putting very, very strong pressure on Hamas, and we are seeing a certain change. And I think this change will grow, and we intend to do it. This is a war goal.
But many are criticizing him for not acting fast enough. During the meeting, rescued hostage Noa Argamani reportedly told Netanyahu that the hardest moment in her captivity was hearing the prime minister say that the war was going to be long, thinking she'd never get out. Many family members had hoped Netanyahu would announce a deal during his speech, but Israel's hostage negotiating team is reportedly expected to depart on Thursday for another round of talks.
Right now, this deal needs to be sealed, and we know that there is one person that needs to decide that this deal needs to be sealed, and this is Benjamin Netanyahu. He needs to decide not to delay this deal, and we are here to remind him that.
Netanyahu's speech is expected to focus on shoring up support for the war in Gaza, an issue that has become deeply divisive not only between the parties, but within the Democratic Party as well. Some members of Congress have said they will not attend the speech, including Vice President Kamala Harris, since she'll be out of state. But Netanyahu is planning to meet Kamala Biden and Republican presidential nominee Donald Trump on Thursday and Friday.
So what can we expect? Let's head to Washington, D.C., where we now find our senior US correspondent, Mike Wagenheim. And Mike, we're getting a clearer idea, aren't we, a couple of hours out, as to who will be in the chamber tonight and who won't be?
I want to just give a quick update, Laura, to Bianca's report. The hostage negotiating team is going to depart over the weekend instead of tomorrow because it's not until tomorrow now that Prime Minister Netanyahu will meet with President Biden. It was expected earlier in the week, got pushed back because of COVID and the political earthquake here. So just a quick update on that. Who can we expect, though, as to your question? Well, I think it's more so the question, who can we not expect to appear? So far, 42 House members, including one Republican, Thomas Massie, have come out and said publicly, we're not going for philosophical, for ideological, for political reasons. There'll be others who don't go for prior commitments or other reasons, but 42 so far House members, including one Republican, have said we're boycotting the speech today. Also, 9 Senate members, all Democrats, have said they're not going and they're boycotting the speech from Prime Minister Netanyahu. We do expect that number to rise, whether they come out and say outright they're boycotting or whether they don't just appear. That is yet to be totaled up, but we do expect that number to rise. Some prominent Democrats among those names so far, including Dick Durbin, the number 2 Senate Democrat, Ryan Schatz, a Jewish Democrat senator out of Hawaii, and a number of Jewish House Democrats as well. 4 so far that we've totaled up have said they won't appear. That number, by the way, of House Dems includes Nancy Pelosi, who has been a huge Israel supporter throughout her career. Apparently, she says enough is enough when it comes to Benjamin Netanyahu, and she will not be attending today's speech. She is the most prominent House Democrat to make that announcement so far.
And Mike, Israel is and remains America's strongest ally in the Middle East. Just when did Israel become such a partisan issue?
I mean, it's always been brewing under the surface, but especially as of late. You look at the Trump years when it became much more of a partisan issue, and the relationship that was obviously built between Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu. And by the way, Netanyahu will meet Trump at Mar-a-Lago tomorrow. But I think more so as the Israel-Hamas war has dragged along, there was substantial Democratic sympathies, as there very well should have been, on October 7th in the immediate aftermath. But as the war has dragged along, and especially as we get into political campaigning and election season going full force here in the U.S., there's been more of a drag on the relationship as folks like Joe Biden and Kamala Harris to a certain extent have called out Benjamin Netanyahu and called out the IDF for military operations in Gaza, and especially with no day after scenario given by Netanyahu, no day after plan. I think there's been extensive criticism coming from Democrats, and we're seeing it now in the flesh here, so to speak, in Congress, with the Prime Minister addressing the joint session today, and many Democrats saying what's been going on in Gaza just not to their liking, not to any political end at this point, other than Netanyahu's survival, and that's why they're simply not attending today.
All right, Mike, thank you very much. Mike Wagenheim there over in Washington, D.C., where Prime Minister Netanyahu is set to speak shortly. Shireen Grossman with me in the studio. And, 5 Americans are among the hostages being held in Gaza. It shouldn't be a partisan issue, should it? But sadly, it has become so over the years.
Well, it has to do with American politics and Western Hemisphere politics as well. And, we spoke about this. It's an election year all over the world. It's not a good time. And everything becomes political. And once the Republicans are the ones that are inviting you, it becomes divisive. And that's the trouble. We shouldn't have gone along with it. I don't think. I think it's a.
You think Netanyahu should have turned down the
most of the experts in Israel would say Israel should go back to being bipartisan. It shouldn't be a one-party kind of topic, and this is a strategic mistake.
Okay, Shireen, for now. Thank you. Thanks. Well, moving to other news, and Iran's former president, Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, narrowly escaped an assassination attempt last week. That's according to Iran International, which reports that the car of the former leader was sabotaged and nearly span off the road as a result. Well, for more on that, we're joined by Camelia Entekabifad. She's the editor-in-chief of the Independent Persian. Great to have you with us, Camelia. First of all, I'd like to point out you have yourself met and interviewed former President Ahmadinejad many times. I just want to ask you, do you think he is a paranoid man, or is he right to fear for his life?
No, he is not paranoid, and I believe that he is the greatest threat for the Islamic Republic and Ayatollah Khamenei himself as a serious opponent of this system inside Iran. If one person during these 45 years of the Islamic Republic's history ever challenged this system and Ayatollah Khamenei, it was no one than Ahmadinejad. And because of this fear, they would not allow him so much can move easily, and also his attempt to run again at the election denied, and the Council of the Guardian 2 times haven't been permitted him to run, which means Ayatollah Khamenei. This man has a certain popularity among of the certain group inside of Iran, and that was so obvious. Whenever he goes, we can see the crowd were cheering for him. And 2 of his closest aides, Mr. Baghai, has been put in prison, and Mr. Mashai and Baghai later on put inside of the mental institution. And this man is completely out of order as of today. And the second close of his friend is his Iran. So they try to control him, and they try to disconnect him from his aid and also from public.
So he does have a support base. Does he pose a threat to the current leadership?
Why not? We remember that Hashemi Rafsanjani, suspiciously, they said he had a heart attack inside of the swimming pool, but his children believe that he was drowned inside the pool. They never give the family chances they can conduct their own autopsy. And even the helicopter crash of Ebrahim Raisi is still under question. Just have a look. The changes came to Iran since Raisi's death. It gives us this theory. It might be orchestrated, an attempt against his life due to the certain changes they believe it would come to the United States, or for the supreme leader's succession. There are many histories. They pretended people lost their lives because of the suicidal case, the car crashes. There are many, and I can see that even that would be one of the attempts against Mr. Ahmadinejad. As you mentioned, I interviewed him many times, and I have spoken with him a few times, and even I have been aware for another case against of his life during Mahsa's revolution. So it's nothing that new. But yes.
And just very briefly, how is the regime in Iran following the political developments in the United States right now?
Very closely. I believe they were making themselves ready for Trump's presidency. And when the news about the Iranian agents try to assassinate President Trump in the U.S., they would put some fears on them. We heard that their denial, their statement to separate themselves from this allegation so quickly issued by them. They made themselves ready for negotiations with Trump. They had Zarif on board for this reason, and he thought Trump can be very angry with them if he believed that there is an Iranian operating agent inside of the U.S. to assassinate him. But today, when they were seeing President Biden has been pulled out from the race, and Kamala Harris has a chances maybe, I can see so fastly they flap their cards, and their unregistered lobbies in the United States, their fifth columns, they were promoting Kamala Harris. They can see that coming a Democrat to power maybe is easier for them over the negotiations and also about Iran nuclear program. It's very interesting and challenging, this election in the regime point of view, and of course for everyone outside of Iran. But they're definitely they were seeing, I can see the fears among of them if Trump becomes the president.
They have their preferred candidate. Camelia, thank you very much indeed. Camelia Entekabifad there at the Independent Persian. Time for a short break. When we come back, Hezbollah has published alarming new drone footage. We'll have the details for you next.
This broadcast is brought to you by Israel Bonds, the most direct and impactful way to support Israel. Invest now at israelbonds.com. This broadcast is brought to you by Israel Bonds, the most direct and impactful way to support Israel. Invest now at israelbonds.com.
Welcome back. The Lebanese terrorist group Hezbollah has today published drone footage of a sensitive Israeli airbase in the north of the country and has published the name of that base's commander. The IDF has been seeking to play down the incident throughout the day. Our Middle East correspondent Ariel Osseran has the details.
For the third time in just over a month, Hezbollah released footage from one of its reconnaissance drones flying undisturbed over northern Israel. The target this time, the Ramat David Air Base, located some 30 miles from the Lebanon border. According to Hezbollah, the 9-minute-long video was taken on Tuesday, and the propaganda video clearly shows the base's various facilities, including fighter jets, electronic systems, and even Iron Dome launchers. Earlier this month, Hezbollah published a drone video showing Israeli military sites in the Golan Heights, and before that, it released a video showing the Haifa area, further exposing Israel's aerial vulnerability. The IDF said the latest Hezbollah video was filmed by a drone for photography purposes only. Activity on the base was not harmed.
Our support front will continue as long as the attacks continue on Gaza Strip. Its people and its resistance continues in its various forms. If Israel continues to target civilians, it will push the resistance to launch rockets and to target new settlements that have not been targeted before.
Meanwhile, the IDF says a soldier was seriously injured a day earlier by rocket fire from Lebanon near Mount Dov, as Hezbollah claimed a number of rocket and drone attacks on northern communities and outposts. The IDF said it responded by shelling launch sites with artillery and fighter jets striking a number of Hezbollah sites in southern Lebanon. The exchange of fire comes as the IDF completed a brigade-level exercise of combat scenarios in Lebanon.
We, the 91st Division and the Northern Command, not only as a statement, are ready, willing and determined to do everything to defeat our enemy and change the security reality in the north and bring back the residents.
The Lebanese Al Akhbar newspaper reported on Wednesday that the commander of the UN's peacekeeping force in southern Lebanon recently visited Israel and met with military officials. Visiting Israel just a month before the renewal of its mandate, UNIFIL's Spanish commander, General Aroldo Lazaro, reportedly said Israel is ready to wage war on Lebanon to remove Hezbollah from the area south of the Litani River if diplomatic solutions do not produce a result.
Well, let's go to the north. We're joined by our correspondent, Robert Swift. And Rob, the IDF trying to play it down somewhat today and dismiss this drone footage, but just how serious is it?
Well, yeah, we can assume that the IDF would do that. I think it does ring a few alarm bells. If a surveillance drone can get into this position, then presumably a drone armed with explosives can do likewise. Added to that is the fact that this is not one incident, but now three where this has taken place, and this incident, presumably filmed in the last couple of days, it is even deeper into Israeli territory. If we talk about the drone which took surveillance pictures of Haifa port, that likely approached through the sea, giving it an easier access route. The footage of this air base is, in the center of Israeli territory, not on the coast, meaning that you would have hoped additional air defense systems and radars would have picked it up as it approached. So it is of concern. That being said, the IDF have not suffered damage or casualties in this incident, nor have either of the other locations that have been surveilled, such as Haifa port. So there is a limit to the damage that Hezbollah have caused, but I think it's worth bearing in mind that this shows that in the age of drones, it's not just states and countries that can have air forces. 20 years ago, the things that Hezbollah are doing would have been limited to countries, but now with the availability of drones, even non-state actors have these capabilities.
Absolutely. Meanwhile, Rob, we're hearing that the IDF has been carrying out drills in preparation for a full-blown war in the north. Is the IDF ready?
That's right. That was the 228th Reserve Brigade that's been being put through its paces in recent days. Essentially, they were focusing on all the different avenues that are likely to take place in an escalated conflict. That includes war fighting, it includes casualty evacuation, as well as other capabilities which would be required to fight a higher intensity conflict in this area. Now, they say that they're ready. They had a focus during that exercise on conducting operations inside difficult terrain, mountainous terrain, which gives guerrilla fighters an advantage. But the IDF has a fair amount of experience at using tanks in difficult terrain, in mountains. And this is obviously not, this is ground that the IDF have fought on many times before. So yeah, the IDF says they're ready. And if there is to be an escalation in this area, then we'll see how that readiness stands up to Hezbollah's capabilities and readiness.
Thank you, Rob. Robert Swift there up in the north. Shiri Fine-Grossman from Forum Dvorah is with me in the studio. And Shiri, it's less than a week, isn't it, that drone flew all the way from Yemen and slammed into an apartment here in Tel Aviv completely undetected, or there was no response anyway. And now we're seeing this today from Hezbollah. What is happening with Israel's defences?
Well, guess who trained the Houthis? It's Hezbollah. And what sorry, I forgot his name. Rob, thank you. Said about non-state actors. Well, that's very much with the help of Iran, which is, is providing drones both to Ukraine and throughout the area. This incident is definitely troubling, and the world should understand what are we dealing with, which is quite a sophisticated army that Hezbollah has built throughout the years. And although the IDF is pounding and taking advantage of what's happening, it's obviously a very, very large concern and kind of a taste of what's yet to come if we're going to a larger scale war. But I have to say, it's part of this psychological warfare that's going on between both sides. Israeli jet fighters are flying over Beirut and other parts of southern Lebanon, disrupting with, noise interference with sonic booms and all kinds of lightnings. And so, this is kind of tit for tat that we're up against, but the threat is serious. The only optimist view I can say, because I was in charge of the Lebanon arena when I was in the National Security Council, and one of the things we were very much concerned about is the fact that the Israeli army, our fighters, didn't have enough combat experience in recent years. Now, that's not the case anymore, and they're coming with capabilities they never had, technologies that we never had. So, that's something to keep in mind as well.
All right, Shiri, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, German police, meanwhile, carried out dozens of raids today on organisations linked to Iran and to its Lebanese proxy Hezbollah. It included a prominent mosque and Islamic centre in the city of Hamburg. Take a listen.
Today we have banned Hamburg's Islamic Center. Following the extensive search measures, our security authorities have analyzed the confiscated material. It is now certain that the Islamic Center Hamburg acts and is directed against our constitutional order. That is why we are applying one of the sharpest weapons of our law to ban this organization. This is a further consequent step against Islamist extremism. It is very important to me to make a clear distinction. We are not acting against a religion. We are making a clear distinction between Islamists, against whom we are taking tough action, and the many Muslims who belong to our country and live their faith.
That was the German Interior Minister there. Let's head to Berlin. We're joined by correspondent Polina Garayev. What happened exactly, Polina?
Well, it should be said that the Islamic Center in Hamburg has been monitored by German law officials since the 90s, even though it's been founded already in the 60s and has a long-standing history of promoting Islamic ideology in Germany. It has been deemed already a suspected extremist organization, but it was only raids conducted last November that allowed officials to gather the sufficient evidence to declare it as a banned organization, something that happens very rarely in Germany, and the burden of proof is usually very high. Here, it seems that without a shred of doubt that this organization pursued not only religious goals, but also political goals, as we heard the German minister say in her statement. It sought to introduce perhaps Islamist ideology and even promote a similar revolution to the one that happened in Iran, also on German soil, thus, of course, working against the German constitution. It was also found to be promoting anti-Semitism and also supporting Hezbollah, which has been banned in Germany in 2020. Jewish groups, of course, welcomed this decision, so did various politicians today. But Iran did protest this as an aggressive act and did summon the German ambassador to Iran in order to lodge his protest.
And Polina, this is something that Iranian dissidents have been warning about for years, that the Islamic regime is kind of spreading its tentacles into Western cities and setting up cells, if you like. How much of a problem is it in Germany?
Well, it's hard to say, and even the German domestic intelligence agency that has been monitoring this organization for years has been reluctant to estimate how many people do adhere to its ideology and the ideas that it disseminated. But it is, of course, a problem that authorities have acknowledged, and traditionally Iran worked through two avenues to exert its influence: trade and religion. And trade with Iran has been diminishing especially over the past couple of years, especially since Germany stops incentivizing businesses to trade with Iran following its crackdown on demonstrations. And also on the religious avenue, Germany has been taking steps to make sure or to curb at least foreign influence through religious institutions, for example, by making sure that imams that lead the Muslim communities in Germany are trained in Germany, as opposed to, for example, in Saudi Arabia, in Turkey, and also in Iran. But the fact that this ban that has apparently been years in the making has finally been introduced today does suggest that perhaps the German government sees the threat of Iranian influence as more severe than before, or perhaps that since October 7th, there is a greater political willingness to do something about it.
Polina, thank you very much. Polina Garayev there in Berlin.
Thank you so much.
Shireen Grossman's with me in the studio. It wasn't just in Hamburg, actually. It was also in Frankfurt and Munich. This is kind of a nationwide crackdown on these Iranian-linked groups.
Well, this is a very important move, and I want to add, it's not just since October 7th. We had an Iranian attack which really pushed the red lines or erased any red lines that were ever in this region before. Attack not using a proxy, by directly hundreds of missiles and drones from Iran. So I think that kind of shook the seats a little bit in European partners such as France and Germany. And while they're not willing to act militarily, they're doing whatever they can. And of course, I mean, I trust the Germans are very thorough, and you need a certain amount of evidence and cooperation. And I guess that came to kind of this growth period that had to, and then that's also deciding the timing. Maybe a political reason, like she said.
They're clearly concerned about what's happening, and it's not just in Germany. Iranian dissidents are warning. We had assassination attempts in the United Kingdom linked to Iran. There have been all sorts of issues.
Taking the Russian playbook.
And the European Union is yet to list the IRGC, of course, as a terrorist organisation, which is something many groups have been pushing for a long time.
And Borrell said he mourns the death of Raisi and called for a moment in silence. There are some kind of moral low points, I have to say. It's very important that at least Europe and the big players there, Germany and France, take more forceful actions, if not militarily, then on the financing, on the propaganda, on what's happening in Moss and elsewhere. We can see all over Europe what's going on in over campuses, and these things are important. And like we said, it comes back to our earlier point: education, finance, things are like that are important. We should watch out for.
Shiri, for now, thank you very much. Now, Sudan's RSF militia has announced it is willing to take part in US broker talks to end the war. The conflict between the RSF and the military government erupted in April last year. Tens of thousands of people have since been killed and some 10 million displaced. Well, Saudi Arabia, Egypt and the United Arab Emirates are also set to participate in that summit. To talk more about that, we're joined by Monim Haroun. He's the advocacy manager at the group HIAS Israel. Thank you very much for being with us, Monim. Any hope? Do you have any hope at all that these talks, these negotiations could bring about a move towards ending this terrible conflict?
Hi, Laura. Thank you so much for having me and for covering this issue. Yes, so there's for peace talks, there's always hope, as we know, as this has been maybe the most functioning way to stop conflict, especially such as the deadly conflicts like what is going on in Sudan. In terms of the current invitation by the U.S. and the Saudi Arabia and the Emirates for peace talks, I think this is an important and a great initiative. And also the agreement by the RSF, by their leaders, Mohammed Dagalo, to participate in the talks is a positive step. However, the successful of these peace talks and to bring to the end of the war is also dependent on the participation of SAF, the Sudanese Armed Forces, in addition to other armed groups that are involved in the current conflict, such as other rebel groups that are siding with the government, with the Sudanese Armed Forces, and other rebel groups that are also engaged in supporting the RSF. So yes, there is a cautious optimism that these peace talks could bring to an end of this war, but the international community and the U.S. and all the actors involved in this initiative have to put in place strong incentives, to push these warring parties to agree for the end of the war or the ceasefire, at least to provide humanitarian accesses for Sudanese people who have sadly dying every day, either by the armed conflict or by starvation.
Yeah, we're hearing from aid groups that a lot of people, millions of people, are on the brink of starvation because of the disruption there. I just wanted to ask you, has there been any sign that the military government would agree to take part in the talks?
Actually, there's not any signs by the military government, but just to say, reading some reactions by some public figures that are supporting the military forces are calling the military leaders to agree for the ceasefire and also to participate in these talks. So currently, the Sudanese Armed Forces did not release any official statement, but it seems like they are about to agree, as if we read the political figures that are supporting them are actually supportive for this initiative. And so hopefully in next couple of days they might respond to the
we should hear more. We should hear more
to the initiative.
Monim, just this week, Iran and Sudan exchanged ambassadors right in the middle of this war. Are you concerned about that? Because we've seen what happens when Iran moves in and exploits conflicts in other countries, like in Yemen, for example. Is that something you're worried about?
Yeah, actually, it wasn't that clear what type of these relations, like renewed relations between Sudan and and Iran are going to look like. But it seems like these relations during this time, especially when there are some accusations made by some reports against Iran by siding with the Sudanese armed forces and supporting and providing some military equipment, it is raising a concern. And you are right. Unfortunately, the involvement with Iran in Sudan also previously wasn't aligned with the interests of the Sudanese people, as many political parties within Sudan raised their concern about these relations with Iran, and also about the interest that Iran has in the region, which might contradict with the interests of the Sudanese people. And also, since this war began, there wasn't any clear position of Iran about the end of the war, and this is also concerning the Sudanese people, because for them, the most important thing that has to happen right now is to stop the war, and not parties engaging to support or side with any part of the warring parties.
All right. Well, Moneem, we hope you'll come back and talk to us when those talks get underway in Switzerland. Thank you very much indeed, Moneem Haroun there at Hayat, Israel.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Laura.
Well, Shiri Fine-Grossman's with me. And Shiri, it could be Iran is on the brink of infiltrating yet another conflict-riven country, and we've seen how that goes before.
Yeah, well, sources say that Iran has been supplying drones to the SAF forces. So this might not be a very new development, but it is kind of this another, we'll say, escalation or deterioration. Depends on how you look at it. And yes, it's a very worrisome sign, and that might has propelled the sides to get into the negotiation tables, that they understand. I mean, the Middle East actors, Saudi Arabia, UAE, that are kind of involved in this conflict, they might.
It's right on Egypt's doorstep, of course.
Exactly, it might propel them to kind of at least get to a ceasefire, which is very much needed, and then try to prolong it as long as possible, just to save lives and try to get humanitarian aid to the starving people of Sudan. And just to say, it's so important that we're talking about Africa, and it's where most killings have taken place by terror in the last year in a quantitative.
And it's completely ignored by the media.
Completely ignored.
Yeah. All right. Shiri Fine-Grossman, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, Arab families here in Israel also lost loved ones in the October 7 attacks, and they also have relatives who are still being held hostage in Gaza. Hamas terrorists, of course, did not discriminate that day. Well, an interfaith non-profit group called Have You Seen the Horizon Lately and the Hostage Family Forum organised a special event between Jewish and Arab families in the southern city of Rahat. And now Emily Francis was there.
Many don't realize that Arab Israelis were not only killed by Hamas terrorists during the October 7th massacre.
She was driving her car pregnant with her husband and an 8-month-old baby. And she was wearing hijab, an Islamic scarf, and they were speaking Arabic. And 8 Hamas attackers came and shot her. And her husband, I just spoke to him, they let 9 kids without their mother. And he said they didn't care that she was not Jewish, that she was Muslim.
But also, as many as 6 are still being held hostage in the tunnels of Gaza.
I'm the brother of Yosef and uncle of Hamza, who were kidnapped on October 7th, together with 2 young children who came back from captivity.
Ali Zayadneh is the head of a large and well-known and respected Bedouin family from Rahat, Israel's largest Arab-Israeli city. A place where, since the beginning of the war, we saw Jews and Arabs volunteering together to bring emergency aid and supplies to Bedouin families living on the fringe.
We're constantly going to many places around the world and telling our story. We're sick of telling the same story. I hope this will be the last meeting.
He and other families got a chance to express their shared pain and concerns at a special meeting with some of the family members of the over 100 Jewish hostages.
We received a horrible gift on October 7th. It's an opportunity to get things done. We don't have a choice. We must find a way to live together.
People are killing each other within the Arab community. You hear about it every morning. People have turned into numbers.
On October 7th, we became one family, suffering from the same fate. I'm the head of the Unity Desk of the Hostage Family Forum. Unity is not just a word. When I speak of unity, it's not just the shared fate. The power of unity has the potential to be much stronger.
Shai Wankert, father of 22-year-old hostage Omer Wankert, says they've barely gotten breadcrumbs of information from one of the released hostages.
After 54 days, Liam Or went outside. He was with Omer 24/7, also with 4 Thai guys in a very deep tunnel because they didn't hear the bombs. No electricity, lack of food, no toilet, no running water, no nothing. Very difficult situation. As you know, Omer has a colitis disease, and we are very worried about this situation. We feel that he has maybe a grenade inside his stomach because it can blow any minute.
Bashir al-Ziadneh has been an advocate working with the Family Forum and personally has family members in Gaza captivity.
Nobody seems to talk about them, and that's why it's very important for me to come here and to speak about them and to stop them from being transparent to all people.
Is there a fear to be more involved with the forum?
Yeah, there is a fear from Hamas that if they are more involved, then Hamas might do harm things to their relatives who are being held as hostages in Gaza.
Enough. It's an embarrassment to Israel and a shame for the country. The government has abandoned these human beings during negotiations to strike a deal. These are human beings.
They try to go to Al Jazeera, the Arab channel of Al Jazeera. They won't interview no one of the hostage family. Not us, not the Bedouin. They want to know that they are suffering because they are citizens of Israel. And they are suffering exactly as I am suffering.
The families are still holding on to hope that a hostage deal will happen.
Jewish and Arab Israelis suffering terribly in the wake of October 7th. Well, that's it for Middle East Now. Do stay with us on I24 News. Kalev Ben-David is up next. Good night.
Shalom. ¿Qué me trae por aquí? La necesidad impostergable de 600 millones de hispanoparlantes que ahora necesitan escuchar el mensaje judío e israelí en tiempos difíciles. ¿Cómo lograrlo? Cuento con ustedes para continuar llevando a lo más alto del mundo mediático una inquebrantable diplomacia pública al servicio de la verdad sin concesión alguna.
A new voice is about to be heard.
אתם צופים בערוץ החדשות i24 News.
i24 News launches its fourth channel in Hebrew, broadcasting 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
ותיעדו את הטבח.
i24 News in Hebrew brings its international success for the past 10 years to Israel. Real-time news, sharp analyses, and passionate debates on the burning issues shaping Israeli society and the entire Middle East. And for you, English-speaking viewers, i24 News offers a unique, immersive experience. Every day until 11 a.m. EST, Hebrew programs will be broadcast live with English subtitles. And from 11 a.m. EST, back to your favorite shows in English. More than ever, the heart of a new Middle East beats on i24 News.
Prime Minister Netanyahu to speak to a joint session of Congress against the backdrop of pressure from hostage families and a U.S. presidential race that's heating up. We'll go to Washington for the latest. National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir draws more political fire after declaring he defied official policy by praying on Jerusalem's sensitive Temple Mount shrine and calling on other Jews to do so. We'll take a closer look at the controversy. And the extensive security arrangements at the Paris Olympics get their first big test at tonight's Israel versus Mali soccer match. We'll go live to the stadium where it's taking place. This is the rundown on i24 News. I'm Khaled Ben-David. In just an hour from now, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu will address a joint session of the U.S. Congress in the Capitol building. It's an unprecedented fourth speech by a foreign leader to the Congress, and the premier is expected to address the war in Gaza and the North, the threat of Iran, and the U.S.-Israel relationship. But it comes as he's under intense pressure to agree to a hostage deal and the backdrop of a U.S. presidential election that's been supercharged by President Joe Biden's withdrawal from the race and likely replacement from Kamala Harris, both of whom will meet with Netanyahu tomorrow. Senior correspondent Bianca Zanini has more in this report.
Bring them home now! Protests outside the U.S. Capitol in Washington leading up to Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's speech to Congress Wednesday evening. Family members of hostages still being held in Gaza calling for a deal to bring them home now.
We need this world to be a better world for everybody, for the people in Gaza that are good, for the people in Israel that are good. We need to stop this war. I'm begging Bibi, help. We need the 120 hostages out. Thank you.
It's been nearly 300 days of war. Netanyahu's visit to Washington comes at a crucial moment, with a potential ceasefire for hostages deal between Israel and Hamas gaining momentum. At a meeting Monday evening with families of hostages, Netanyahu struck a positive tone.
We are determined to bring them all back. The conditions to bring them back are ripening, for the simple reason that we are putting very, very strong pressure on Hamas, and we are seeing a certain change. And I think this change will grow, and we intend to do it. This is a war goal.
But many are criticizing him for not acting fast enough. During the meeting, rescued hostage Noa Argamani reportedly told Netanyahu that the hardest moment in her captivity was hearing the prime minister say that the war was going to be long, thinking she'd never get out. Many family members had hoped Netanyahu would announce a deal during his speech.
Right now, this deal needs to be sealed, and we know that there is one person that needs to decide that this deal needs to be sealed, and this is Benjamin Netanyahu. He needs to decide not to delay this deal, and we are here to remind him that.
Netanyahu's speech is expected to focus on shoring up support for the war in Gaza, an issue that has become deeply divisive not only between the parties, but within the Democratic Party as well. Some members of Congress have said they will not attend the speech, including Vice President Kamala Harris, since she'll be out of state. But Netanyahu is planning to meet Kamala Biden and Republican presidential nominee Donald Trump on Thursday and Friday.
Well, let's now go to our senior U.S. correspondent, Mike Wagenheim in Washington. And Mike, not the first speech by Prime Minister Netanyahu to Congress. Not the first time it's under some controversy. Of course, remember his speech on Iran and during the Obama administration. But the circumstances this time particularly challenging for the Prime Minister.
No doubt whatsoever, and there's been blowback here within the halls of the Capitol to his speech today, or the very idea that he's addressing Congress under these particular circumstances. Our count right now is 42 members of the House, including one Republican, Thomas Massie, are boycotting the speech today, not dealing with other commitments or things like that, but actually boycotting on philosophical, ideological, political grounds. 9 senators additionally have signed on essentially to a boycott of Netanyahu's speech here today. These are tough times for the U.S.-Israel relationship in a number of ways, and some of it comes down personally to what people feel are disagreements with Netanyahu that cannot be resolved. He's planning on focusing on the Iran issue today, and not in the same way as 2015. Obviously, these are different times and different circumstances, but he's going to try to connect the dots, not only to what's going on vis-a-vis the proxies of Hezbollah, Hamas, and the Houthi rebels, but insecurity potentially here in the American homeland when it comes to dealing with Iran. The big question, and many Democrats specifically have asked this question, is Netanyahu going to deal specifically with the day after scenarios of Gaza? When the war ends, who's going to take over? What are the circumstances going to be in the day after?
I'm ask you,
those are answers the Biden administration. Yes.
Yes, I'm going to just interrupt you.
Yes,
Prime Minister Netanyahu is speaking now, so stay with us, but let's go to hear him speak.
To breach the walls of Jerusalem on this day, almost 2,000 years ago. Well, our enemies will not breach our walls today. And our wall is not made up only of our own soldiers, our brave heroes, but also the friendship and alliance with the great United States of America. That is very much expressed here today, and I thank you for giving me this opportunity. And the people of Israel, thank you for giving us this opportunity to express our common alliance. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Very much.
And that was Prime Minister Netanyahu with the Republican Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson. Let me go back to our Mike Wagenheim. And Mike, it was the Speaker Johnson and the Republicans that really wanted Benjamin Netanyahu to be at the Congress today.
No doubt whatsoever. And Chuck Schumer, the Senate Majority Leader, belatedly agreeing to have Netanyahu. It really needs the signing off of both the Speaker of the House and the Senate Majority Leader. By the way, this will be the first interaction as Netanyahu prepares to meet not only with Johnson, but also the rest of the so-called Big Four, House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell, and the Majority Leader of the Senate, Chuck Schumer. This will be the first interaction between Netanyahu and Schumer since Schumer made that explosive speech a few months ago calling for Netanyahu essentially to stand out for new Israeli leadership, specifically calling Netanyahu, along with Mahmoud Abbas, the Palestinian Authority president, obstacles to peace. It's going to be a really interesting meeting coming up there, and it might happen behind closed doors in the end. But certainly Democrats are trying to get answers from Netanyahu about his plan in the short and medium term for a potential ceasefire in exchange for the release of hostages, which would certainly go a along with the release of Palestinian security prisoners, and what's to come in the longer term in terms of a plan for reconstruction of Gaza, the security situation in Gaza. What does Israel have in mind? Is it long-term security presence in Gaza? Is it working with the Arab world to try to maintain a multinational force there? These are answers that I think Democrats are looking for beyond the usual rhetoric in terms of the shared values of the U.S.-Israel relationship, the ironclad commitment. Netanyahu will certainly thank Joe Biden. To what extent, we're not sure yet, but we'll thank Joe Biden for his commitment to Israeli security. But Dems are looking to extract more answers that have not been forthcoming as of yet from Netanyahu in terms of a viable plan going forward.
All right, Mike Wagenheim, we're going to be staying with us. We'll be coming back to you. But since you, of course, discussed the key issue there of the hostages and a potential hostage deal, let's go now to our correspondent, Zach Anders, who is in Hostage Square here in Tel Aviv. And Zach, this is a night, an event that a lot of the hostage families didn't want to happen. Benjamin Netanyahu in Washington speaking to Congress until there was a hostage deal, or unless he was going to announce a hostage deal. What's the mood there this evening?
Eklev, apologies. We're in Dizengoff Square. We're about to walk with the march and meet them in Hostage Square, where big screens are set up that will play the speech live. Spoken to a few family members already. The frustration's palpable. This is anger that's been stemming for months around the political situation. They feel it is a political situation, not an imperative on the Netanyahu administration to get a deal done before he leaves for Congress. Before he left, we spoke to these same family members. Livid is the way to describe how they're feeling, at least the representative of who we've spoken to. As I watch the Israeli channels and watch the translations, there are some other family members that are more hesitant to outright criticize Netanyahu, but the ones that are here today and marching today are willing to step in front and outright criticize Netanyahu for even leaving the country at a time of war to go to this speech. We spoke to Lee Segal. His brother Keith was taken from Kfar Aza. His wife was released during the first ceasefire deal. He is, besides himself is one way to describe it. Their family is in D.C. His daughters, Keith, who's still in Gaza, his daughters went to D.C., but to boycott, not to be a part of the speech. They feel like this is not representative of what needs to happen now. We spoke to him just a few moments ago. This is what Lee, his brother, had to say.
Both Aviva, my sister-in-law, Keith's wife, and one of their daughters, Ilan, are in D.C. for the couple of days now around the speech in the Congress to advocate and speak with United States politicians to keep this message at the top of everyone's agenda. Close the deal, bring them home now. We as a family decided that our time is better spent not being a prop in the gallery of the Congress and listening to the political messaging of Prime Minister Netanyahu. We will spend our time speaking to what he says, because what he says, no matter what he says, is irrelevant. He left Israel. He did not close the deal. Keith and another 119 hostages are still in Gaza. Nothing that Netanyahu can say has any relevance to the reality of the hostages are still in Gaza. He has not closed a deal. If we are put in the gallery of the United States Congress and have no opportunity to respond or relate in real time to what is being said, we are there for him to point up at us and say, I am working day and night to return the hostages. I am working day and night against anti-Semitism. I am working day and night to forge more alliances against Iran. That is all irrelevant to us. The only issue at hand is returning the hostages today. So when you're sitting in an audience where many people will be jumping up and applauding because that's the culture of that kind of event, and we have nothing to contribute to that. It's not a dialogue. It's a lecture with themes that are not relevant to us.
Zach And is there. Thank you for that hard word, Zach, but one can understand where that gentleman is coming from. Now, with us in studio for more, we have our senior correspondent, Bianca Zanini, and our Middle East correspondent, Ariel Osseron. And Ariel, let's update on the status of for example, the hostage talks, which are perhaps even at a critical stage at this point.
At critical stage, but apparently the timetable keeps on prolonging, at least, and the families of the hostages are very frustrated, as you could hear. But a lot of the frustration was by the fact that at the beginning of the week they announced that the negotiating team would be leaving for Qatar on Thursday, tomorrow. Now, senior diplomatic official in Israel saying that given that the Biden-Netanyahu meeting is to discuss the details of the negotiations, you can't have a delegation meeting and negotiating itself prior to that. Therefore, this diplomatic source telling us that the Israeli delegation will leave to Qatar only next week. My understanding is the beginning of the week. This does not add a sense of security among the families of the hostages. I will just note that former cabinet member and Minister Benny Gantz said today that Israel could have moved forward with this deal weeks ago, that it had approved it weeks ago, and the reason why it could have done that is because this proposal, it's called the Biden proposal, but it's based on Israeli proposal. And so the fact that the mediators saying that they're all waiting for official response from Israel regarding the Israeli response, it just shows how much of a farce, for lack of another word, this whole thing is being managed, unfortunately.
Right, and Bianca, domestic criticism for the Prime Minister at home, but also heading in the United States, where, of course, the Gaza conflict and his direction of it has been hugely controversial, and that's being reflected by, of course, the boycott by many Democrats this evening of his speech at Congress.
Right, and before we get to that, I just want to add to what Ariel was saying, the criticism that Netanyahu has completely lost touch with the urgency that exists for the hostage families and for the hostages in Gaza. He's been criticized for that by the families, of course, by the opposition. But there's also another aspect to it, which is still political, but not necessarily about whether or not he has lost touch with it, but whether there is an element of a strategy of when it would be the smartest for him to announce it for his own political gain, but also for the best timing that he could potentially see for the deal. For instance, if he waits until the beginning of August and we'll get a little bit closer to the election, and then there's going to be a bigger chance that the ceasefire is actually going to be holding still, and then it's going to be easier to make a decision based on knowing whether or not it's going to be Trump or Kamala that will be taking over in January. So there are also analysis and reports that, yes, Israel and Hamas have essentially agreed to most, if not all, of the details on the deal, but it is about the timing of when to start it. So that is also an important factor to add into this discussion. And yes, as you were saying, several Democrats deciding to boycott this. And Kalev, it really shows how much the war in Gaza and the U.S. relationship with Israel has become such a defining symbol for the older and the newer generation inside the Democratic Party, the woke movement, the squad, and the more traditional Democrats. And of course, the big one that is not going to be there is Kamala Harris, the vice president. She's going to be in Indianapolis, and she has announced that no, she'll not be present, but she will meet with him privately. Of course, although her staff is saying that this is not a snub, this was an important speech that had already been planned before, there is obviously a message of some sort being sent here, at the very least, that she's trying to balance and trying to figure out. I mean, she's only been the almost official Democratic nominee for less than a week, right? So this is very new and very delicate territory.
All right, well, since you bring that up, and Kamala Harris choosing to be out on the campaign trail this evening instead of being there. The Democrats, of course, have already rallied around Kamala Harris as their candidate. And in fact, a new national poll shows her gaining slightly higher support than Donald Trump. And Harris did come under criticism today from Republican leaders and Israeli officials for skipping out on Netanyahu's speech to Congress this evening, saying that it was no way to treat an ally. Meanwhile, Donald Trump is preparing to host Netanyahu at Mar-a-Lago on Friday. He had a surprising exchange with Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas. Our Emmanuel Honorat has more on that in this report.
Maybe it's the element of surprise, or maybe it's actually something about Kamala. But just 3 days after President Joe Biden announced he was dropping out, the first polls show Vice President Kamala Harris is leading Republican nominee Donald Trump 44% to 42%. The poll by Reuters and the market research company Ipsos was conducted on Monday and Tuesday following the Republican National Convention in Milwaukee and Biden's bombshell announcement on Sunday. Meanwhile, Harris hit the ground running and has not only managed to raise over $81 million in less than 24 hours after entering the race, but held her first campaign rally in Wisconsin, where she wasn't afraid of showing her teeth to Trump.
I took on perpetrators of all kinds. Predators who abused women, fraudsters who ripped off consumers, cheaters who broke the rules for their own gain. So hear me when I say, I know Donald Trump's type.
At the same time, Trump is also trying to get his ducks in order, with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu stateside and meeting with Biden on Thursday. It's only fitting that the Republican candidate would schedule his own meeting with Netanyahu, walking a tightrope between appeasing the Israelis and the Palestinians, whoever becomes the new name of the game in the U.S. presidential campaign. Mere hours after publishing details of his meeting with Netanyahu, Trump's platform, Truth Social, posted a letter from Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas condemning the assassination attempt on the former president, along with a handwritten felt pen response addressing the Palestinian president as Mahmoud and saying, "Everything will be good." With both parties fighting their own demons, the surprise entry of Vice President Harris in the race seems to be doing more than just wowing her followers.
And we do have some live pictures of the protest there outside the Capitol building. You can see in the background there's a sizable crowd. This was expected. Anti-Israel, pro-Palestinian, some might say pro-Hamas protest is there outside the Capitol building. Let's go back inside the Capitol and our senior U.S. correspondent, Mike Wagenheim. And Mike, as we've been talking about, Kamala Harris deciding not to be there. She, as president of the Senate, usually presides over these kind of events. Many in Israel seeing that as something as a slight, a slap. And speaking of which, Donald Trump's message about today, praising Mahmoud Abbas also, well, that's a very interesting approach to take right before you meet Benjamin Netanyahu.
I don't know if he was praising Abbas specifically, but certainly grateful to get as such a note. Kind of surprising that Abbas, of all people, would try to re-engage with Trump at this point after their pretty public falling out several years ago. But hey, I think Abbas is practical as well when it comes to the issue and know that Trump needs flattery above much else when it comes to dealing with him in a personal relationship. So it's not necessarily a bad move on the part of Mahmoud Abbas. This is definitely an issue with Kamala Harris. It's being talked about not only here in Israel, but as well here in America. I wouldn't say skipping out on this particular event because her initiative up in Indianapolis, her appearance up there was planned in advance. It's tough sometimes, I think, for Israelis to see the internal workings of American politics and to kind of come out from the bubble a little bit. This is a situation that's unprecedented here here where somebody is out of contention for a nomination, not even in the race, and 24 to 36 hours later, suddenly she's effectively the nominee. So Harris has a very small window here in order to campaign, in order to drum up support, in order to get her operation going, which, by the way, it's really telling that she's been able to do all this in such a limited amount of time. But she will meet, I think this is the bigger issue, she will meet personally with Netanyahu tomorrow. And in such a situation like this, in order for her to do that, she's got to be out on the campaign trail today. It's very difficult to take 2 days off from a very abbreviated, unprecedented presidential campaign simply to focus on Benjamin Netanyahu and focus on the U.S.-Israel relationship. I think the bigger thing will be the one-on-one meeting tomorrow rather than just sitting up on the podium today behind Netanyahu listening to what she could be listening to in person tomorrow. I think that needs to be noticed as well.
Sure. And I also want to note, Mike, that ahead of tonight's speech, Prime Minister Netanyahu did attend a memorial service earlier today at a Washington synagogue for the late Democratic Senator and Vice Presidential candidate Joe Lieberman, who passed away in March. Netanyahu's tribute to Lieberman maybe was intended as a message to a new generation of Democrats. Let's listen to a bit of it.
He was an American patriot and a proud Jew who steadfastly stood with Israel and the Jewish people, especially during trying times. And it's precisely during these trying times that I miss him even more.
Mike, fair to say maybe there's a message there to Democrats today. Be more like Joe.
Yeah, but we're looking at a bygone era, and it's not just Joe Lieberman that's part of the bygone era. It's just a political point of view, a centrist point of view. There are very few still within that range here in Congress. It's kind of gone to the extremes on both sides. Yes, there is a message, I guess, to get back to that, but probably Netanyahu's critics will throw that back at him and say, well, what about the centrism in Israel? Where's that at right now? If your side is controlled by the extremists as well, as we've seen internally politically in Israel. So it kind of works both ways, and one doesn't really fly without the other at this point.
All right, Mike Wagenheim at the Capitol. We will be covering live. We will be showing live, certainly, that Netanyahu address, which begins in about 35 minutes. Should begin about 35 minutes. Mike Wagenheim, thank you for that. And Ariel, Mike saying maybe a smart move by Mahmoud Abbas, sending that letter to Donald Trump. Let's keep in mind the Palestinian Authority, Mahmoud Abbas, basically boycotted Donald Trump after the decision to move the U.S. Embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. It looks like the Palestinians are covering, or Mahmoud Abbas is covering his bases in case Donald Trump returns to office. Indeed,
it appears that he already has a gauge as to what is going to be the results of the November election. And the best example for that, not just in the letter, but ending the letter, wishing you strength and safety in that order. I think that really shows that he's trying to pander to Trump, but to Trump's personality most of all. And this comes, as you described, after basically non-existent relations between Palestinian President Abbas and former President Trump following that 2017 decision to recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel and moving the embassy there. Following that decision, the PA pretty much severed ties with Washington, closing the PLO offices in D.C., and the U.S. responding with cutting aid to the Palestinians. Under Biden, that has been Biden tried to put the relations back on track. They haven't been at the same stage as they were before Trump came into the White House. But I think the fact that President Abbas made a point of sending this letter shows that he's aware that he's going to probably need to work again with Donald Trump, and it's better to do that on positive terms. Possibly, but as we saw in that report, the political situation may be changing fast in the U.S., and certainly Kamala Harris is looking to be a more... This is Abbas anticipation, that's all. More formidable opponent for Donald Trump than President Biden was. I'm going to ask Ariel. Bianca, stay with us. We are going out for a brief break. Lots more to come on the rundown, just back in a few minutes. So stay with us. We'll be right back.
Our beloved region was 95% heaven before that fateful day. Then, in one piercing moment, horror and darkness took over our lives. But Jewish National Fund, USA, were here with us from day one, helping us to collect our pieces together. We choose life, and we will continue, always, to choose life together.
This broadcast is brought to you by Israel Bonds, the most direct and impactful way to support Israel. Invest now at israelbonds.com. This broadcast is brought to you by Israel Bonds, the most direct and impactful way to support Israel. Invest now at israelbonds.com.
Welcome back to the Rundown on I-24 News, and let's focus now on the security situation in the north. Hezbollah today released a new propaganda video taken by one of its drones showing the Ramat David air base in northern Israel. Now, according to the Iran-backed Lebanese militia, the video was taken yesterday, where the IDF says it was filmed by a drone for photography purposes only, and that activity on the sensitive base was not harmed. But this does underscore the key role that is played by the Iranian-supplied drones in Hezbollah's assault on northern Israel. Middle East correspondent Ariel Osran has a story.
For the third time in just over a month, Hezbollah released footage from one of its reconnaissance drones flying undisturbed over northern Israel. The target this time, the Ramat David air base, located some 30 miles from the Lebanon border. According to Hezbollah, the 9-minute-long video was taken on Tuesday, and the propaganda video clearly shows the base's various facilities, including fighter jets, electronic systems, and even Iron Dome launchers. Earlier this month, Hezbollah published a drone video showing Israeli military sites in the Golan Heights, and before that, it released a video showing the Haifa area, further exposing Israel's aerial vulnerability. The IDF said the latest Hezbollah video was filmed by a drone for photography purposes only. Activity on the base was not harmed.
Our support front will continue as long as the attacks continue on Gaza Strip. Its people and its resistance continues in its various forms. If Israel continues to target civilians, it will push the resistance to launch rockets and to target new settlements that have not been targeted before.
Meanwhile, the IDF says a soldier was seriously injured a day earlier by rocket fire from Lebanon near Mount Dov, as Hezbollah claimed a number of rocket and drone attacks on northern communities and outposts. The IDF said it responded by shelling launch sites with artillery and fighter jets striking a number of Hezbollah sites in southern Lebanon. The exchange of fire comes as the IDF completed a brigade-level exercise of combat scenarios in Lebanon.
We, the 91st Division and the Northern Command, not only as a statement, are ready, willing and determined to do everything to defeat our enemy and change the security reality in the north and bring back the residents.
The Lebanese El Akhbar newspaper reported on Wednesday that the commander of the UN's peacekeeping force in southern Lebanon recently visited Israel and met with military officials. Visiting Israel just a month before the renewal of its mandate, UNIFIL's Spanish commander, General Aroldo Lazaro, reportedly said Israel is ready to wage war on Lebanon to remove Hezbollah from the area south of the Litani River if diplomatic solutions do not produce a result.
Well, for more, let's go to our correspondent who's up in northern Israel near the Lebanese border, Robert Swift. And Robert, an update on today's activity there. But also, I have to comment on that report. The IDF may say, well, these drones were not were for only photographing. They weren't disrupting the activity. But just the fact that these drones could fly over a place like Ramat David Air Base and those sensitive chemical facilities in Haifa is a disturbing sight.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, saying this for photography purposes, let's be honest, it's surveillance. If Hezbollah are able to get a drone with cameras presumably over the base, and presumably they're also able to get drones carrying explosives, and that will likely be what the IDF are most concerned with. It's also worth bearing in mind that the surveillance capabilities in themselves, maybe not specifically in this instance, but in other areas along the border, we've seen where Hezbollah's weapon systems are able to have greater effect, greater targeting ability against IDF positions because of surveillance which is provided by the drones. So this in itself is of concern, and likely the IDF are right now coming up with ways and means to try and counter this threat. Now, we've been hearing for the last 6 or so hours since we've been working up here on the northern border, almost constantly there's been fighter jets in the skies over our heads. There is right now, as we're reporting from Kiryat Shmona. Now, it's not totally unusual to hear fighter jets in this war zone, but the level of activity in the air over our heads is, let's say, at a higher tempo than usual, and that may be in relation to the capabilities that Hezbollah has once again demonstrated in recent days.
All right, and again, IDF trying to find an answer to those drones. We know they've started to use land-based, basically flak guns, the Vulcan, kind of an old piece of equipment that's taken down some drones, but for these definitely higher altitude drones, posing a challenge there to the IDF in the north. Robert Swift, thank you for that. And Ariel, again, disturbing report. The question is, certainly the war in the north is one of the issues that Prime Minister Netanyahu is going to have to address. And certainly with President Biden and Kamala Harris, the U.S. wants to see a diplomatic solution to this conflict rather than it develop into an all-out war.
And the U.S. is spearheading those diplomatic efforts with Amos Hochstein, the special envoy for President Biden. He's an energy advisor, but he has proven himself to be the go-to person with regards to the United States and Lebanon. These efforts are continuing, but the indications aren't good. We heard what the UNIFIL commander said just a few days ago. He visited Israel 10 days ago. And on that note, on the continuation of their mandate, the peacekeeping force, so in fact, the U.S. Security Council, the UN Security Council, will hold tonight a dedicated session to discuss the implementation of Resolution 1701, or the lack thereof. A quick reminder, UN Resolution 1701 prohibits Hezbollah from being holding weapons south of the Litani River. That resolution was the result of the previous war between Israel and Hezbollah in 2006. So for 18 years, the existing diplomatic solution hasn't been implemented. Israel turned a blind eye and allowed Hezbollah to increase its stockpile of weapons to monstrous levels. And the situation right now is that UN Resolution 1701 is still not being implemented. They're talking about diplomatic solutions to try and bridge the gaps, but at the end of the day, there is a diplomatic solution that is not working. And so with the time running down, according to Israeli leaders, for their decision that the diplomatic avenue isn't working and the military route is the way to go, the United States is continuing to make this push. But as we hear the indications, at least coming from Israel, regarding the possibility of this diplomatic solution aren't too positive.
Certainly we haven't seen any signs of that yet. Now, bringing it back to domestic politics, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is reportedly working to create a new political forum to help direct the war against Hamas that would reportedly include National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir, who has demanded a greater say in military policy. Now, that move has been opposed by other members of the government who charge that Ben-Gvir leaks sensitive material from security deliberations and is something of a loose cannon. Well, Ben-Gvir gave his critics more fuel for that fire today by declaring at a conference that last week he prayed on Jerusalem's Temple Mount religious compound, home of the Al-Aqsa Mosque, and a flashpoint for Israel-Muslim tensions. Jews are allowed on the Temple Mount, but official policy since 1967 is that public prayer is forbidden there. But here is what Ben-Gvir had to say today.
I went up onto the Temple Mount last week. I prayed on the Temple Mount. And we will pray on the Temple Mount. They always told me this is not the official policy, but the moment I entered my position, I told the police, I am the official policy. And the official policy is to allow Jews to pray on the Temple Mount.
Now, the Prime Minister's office responded with a statement that, quote, Israel's policy of maintaining the status quo on the Temple Mount has not changed and will not change. Much harsher reactions to Ben-Gvir came from members of both the opposition and the government, including a tweet from Defense Minister Yoav Gallant saying sitting in the Israeli government is a pyromaniac who is trying to set fire to the Middle East. I oppose any negotiations to appoint him to the war cabinet. This will allow him to realize his plans. And Bianca, there are few issues, there's domestic criticism, but few issues as combustible internationally for Israel as the Temple Mount, both in the region, beyond with Muslim nations, and of course with the international community.
Absolutely. And we've got a minister here, Ben-Gvir, saying that he's challenging status quo, but really he's challenging Netanyahu, right? And he's choosing to do this once again. It's not the first time he's done things like this. To do it at a moment where Netanyahu and where the focus of the world and the focus of the country is at this deal. Netanyahu is in Washington. Everyone's talking about the deal, and he doesn't want this deal. He said that he prayed at the Temple Mount. He prayed for the safe return of the hostages, just not through a deal. And you've got to give it to him. He knows how to use his position, and he knows how to put focus on on his policy and what he wants to set the agenda. And he is saying and doing something that many Israelis agree with. Many Israelis say that it is completely unfair that Jews can't pray there. So it is an issue that it's not just a radical outsider that came and stirred up the waters a little bit. No, I mean, he's doing it in the most provocative way, in a way that has been highly criticized and that could be very dangerous, but he is doing what his base wants him to do.
Right, and he's doing what the police are supposed to prevent, according to official policy, and he is not. And he is in charge. He is right. He is in charge officially, at least of the police.
He says the political leadership might be against it, but the political leadership is me.
Is me now. And reactions on the Arab side, as we can expect, this is the kind of thing they're waiting for Ben-Gvir to do, in a sense.
Playing directly into the hands of terror groups that are using this. This is perhaps their number one talking point to further incite the Palestinian public and to use this as justification for attacks. You see Hamas, Palestinian Islamic Jihad, constantly push the narrative that Israel is trying to Judaize the Temple Mount, trying to split it between Jews and Muslims. And in their last statement coming out just a few minutes ago, Hamas obviously condemning Ben-Gvir's visit, calling him the terrorist minister in the Zionist government, saying that his steps give validation to their concerns that there is this attempt to Judaize the Temple Mount Al-Aqsa Mosque compound. And we keep on saying that this is dangerous, this is combustible. This is exactly the reason why it is so dangerous. It's playing exactly into the hands of terror groups, of their most effective talking point to further incite for violence against Israeli citizens, as well as Israeli military and security personnel. And so coming at a time like this, The statement following last week, his ascension to the mountain. Also, clearly the political angle is present domestically, but at the end of the day, if he says, I am the political echelon, we would expect a little more responsibility from the political echelon, especially in such a critical time of war and heightened violence in and around Israel.
Not when it comes to Ben Gvir.
Not when it comes to Ben Gvir. And as you said, Bianca, there are many Israelis who do believe who do believe that they should be allowed to go on the Temple Mount, and that is an issue that is under debate in Israel. Maybe we can come back to that, but moving on, there has been unprecedented security arrangements put into place at the Paris Summer Olympics. And those are getting their first big test tonight. Ahead of the games, official opening on Friday, a preliminary soccer match is being played tonight between the teams of Israel and Mali. Some 1,000 police have been deployed at the Parc des Princes Stadium, where pro-Palestinian, anti-Israel demonstrations are underway. Earlier in the day, Israeli President Isaac Herzog's just-landed plane was held up at Charles de Gaulle Airport, not permitted to disembark for nearly an hour due to what French authorities called a security incident. Here are some of the voices that are being heard from Paris heading into tonight's soccer match.
The athletic people, they can come here, but with neutral flag, not with flag of Israel. Israel, the government of Israel, is a criminal war, so they don't have right to come with flag of Israel and Olympic. You know, normally Olympic, it's a symbol of peace in the world, and criminal war come here. It's not normal.
Il est vrai que ces deux matchs.
It's true that the two Olympic Games between Iraq and Ukraine and Israel and Mali, and in particular the Israel versus Mali game, is subject to security and an anti-terrorism perimeter, meaning around 1,000 police officers that will allow us to be there for sports. The Israeli delegation is particularly protected. I made this decision 2 weeks ago because since the Munich Olympics, where some athletes were killed, we've been seeing this very sensitive issue with the geopolitical situation leading them to face threats. And so, from the start to the end of their presence in our national territory, they will be protected by men and women of the Special Tactical Force and the elite police forces 24/7.
With regard to the security of the Israeli athletes, we have the full confidence in the French authorities. First of all, it's the French authorities who are responsible for security. They're working very meticulously. They're working very professionally. The Israeli athletes, since 1972, they always have taken their own additional security measures, and so they did also this time, and they feel comfortable with this situation, as we know from the contact with them.
Well, for more, let's go now to our correspondent there in Paris, Hannah Papiashvili. She's outside, of course, that stadium where this is taking place. First of all, Hannah, give us just a sense of the atmosphere going into it. Heavy security? Are we seeing any protest? How much of a concern is there for the demonstrations? Maybe even worse than that.
Hi, Kalev. So we are here in Parc des Princes, and for the moment, there is no incident here around this stadium, because we know there is a big security challenge here for this football game of Israel against Mali. There are 1,000 policemen who are here to protect all these people who are coming for this game. You can see it on the images of my cameraman, Hélène Corby. We see a lot of policemen. When we entered to this place, it was a lot of checking. They see inside the bag, they see what's going on, and we can see these policemen. You know, they are here. We have like the elite of the police, of the French police, who are here to protect the people for this match, but also the Israeli delegation, also Yitzhak Herzog, the president of Israel, who will be here, the Minister of Sport, Miki Zohar, who will be also here for this game. It's a big challenge for France, and for the moment there is no security incident, no protest of Palestinians, and there is the spirit of the game. We can see we have some fans here of Israel. David is here with us. Can you come to us, David? And I will ask you one question about the concern about security. You are not afraid to come to support Israel tonight?
No. I'm just really happy to support Israel. I support Israel all day long with my yellow bracelet and my bracelet to saying thank you, Tzahal, and no fear.
Thank you, David.
Hannah, can I ask David? Could you ask David? He's walking around with his Israeli flag wrapped around him. Would he walk around the streets of Paris like that?
Listen, we will ask to him, but I don't think so, Caleb. Are you afraid to walk in Paris with like this bracelet of for the hostages or something like this? Do you feel secure in France?
I don't really feel secure, to be honest, but I think it's not the time to be afraid. Lo lefachet klal.
So the flag, you just put it here.
Yes. I don't go to work with my flag and stuff. But I have also some T-shirt for the hostage and the family forum of Tel Aviv, and we have to be alive.
Thank you. Yes, we have to be alive. You are right, David. Thank you. Yes, Caleb, it's a little bit complicated, of course, to go with this flag of Israel in the streets of Paris for security concerns. But here, everybody is allowed to bring the flag and to support the team of Israel, who will play to this game. The team of Israel didn't play for 48 years. They are coming back tonight, and the guys of Guy Luzon will probably win.
All right. Well, I hope some of that fighting spirit we've heard from David there, and I see some of those other fans will inspire the Israeli Olympic team there, and that is good to see on the streets of Paris. Hannah Papashvili, thank you so much for that. And, you know, Bianca, we get so much negative news about the atmosphere in Europe. Understandably, if you put 1,000 police on the streets there, it's a different atmosphere. But that is another side to see of the Jewish population, certainly there.
This was really lovely to see. I mean, it's always nice to have positive vibes going on at a moment where there has been issued travel warnings. I mean, the Israeli National Security Council has said that an event like this is crème de la crème, to use a French expression, is a higher threat for attacks and threats of preferred targets, right, for terrorists to attack. And there's that issue where, of course, the security is on high alert, but there's also the issue of just underlying anti-Semitism.
Right.
And then there's the issue of the war. So we are expecting to see anti-war protests and anti-Israel protests, pro-Palestinian protests. But the thing is that as much as many of these protesters try to say that this is about the war, it always ends up having very controversial elements as part of these protests that often turn into violence or threats or direct anti-Semitism. So we have the issue of anti-Semitism, we've got the issue of heightened threats, terrorist threats, and we've got the issue of protests against the war. So really right there, as we saw our correspondent in front of the stadium, it seems that right now with the heightened police presence that there is a really good atmosphere. But at the moment, as we've heard many Jews in Paris say that they're not feeling safe.
Right. Well, let's hope at least during the Olympics we'll pass without major incidents and that security will hold. Now, Tomorrowland is the world's top music festival of electronic dance music, attracting hundreds of thousands of young people from all over the world to its venue in Belgium this week. And while Israelis may be finding themselves persona non grata at other events in Europe and elsewhere this summer, though not at the Olympics, we should say, this year's edition of Tomorrowland does boast an impressive Israeli presence, including a tribute to the victims of the Nova Music Festival who were killed on October 7th. Sivan Sisi and Joe Brown have the story.
This was how the set of the Israeli DJ Skazi at the Tomorrowland Festival, which got underway last weekend, looked.
First of all, this year is a special year for this festival, and I decided to devote this set to our wounded, to our soldiers, to our hostages, because I think it's very, very important for morale, even when we're abroad. I've received several messages from people who prefer me not to be political and not to say the first thing that comes to mind, but that doesn't interest me. When I came here from the beginning, my goal was to unite Israelis from this stage.
Although every year we feel we have a mission, this year it's something special. There were guys who were with us in the main square there last year, and this year, they are no longer with us.
This moment of a young Israeli man in a wheelchair, hoisted with the Israeli flag during the set of the Dutch DJ Hardway and Skazi, moved not only the Israelis in the crowd, but the entire audience. The festival, that takes place in the aptly named Belgian town of Boom each year, attracts tourists from all over the world. Despite, or maybe even because of, the war, it was important to the Israelis to stick to the tradition of the communal photo.
Every year we gather for this photo. Everyone comes together to show the power of the Israelis there. And for me, we're also represented. And it always goes viral. It's very important to us every year, but especially this year.
Even during the set of the Israeli group Vini Vici, one of the songs was dedicated to Elia Eluz, who died in the Nova massacre and moved the crowds to tears.
Every year we gather for this photo. Everyone comes together to show the power of the Israelis there. And for me, we're also represented. And it always goes viral. It's very important to us every year, but especially this year.
At a time when quite a few anti-Semitic incidents are commonplace in shows and festivals around the world, images like these of Israelis in foreign fields waving Israeli flags and singing in Hebrew without fear gives hope during a difficult time.
Well, as those Nova survivors say, we'll dance again, and some of them may perhaps are dancing there in Tomorrowland. Now, just a reminder, at the top of the hour, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is set to give us, of course, his address to a joint session of Congress. What you're looking at now are live pictures. You see the U.S. Capitol, of course, the House chamber, there where Benjamin Netanyahu will speak. This is supposed to start in about 6 minutes. On the other side, you see those protests. The protesters gathered out, hundreds, even thousands. This was expected, and of course, a heavy police presence there as well. There is a chamber. You'll see some empty seats. We know, I think it's somewhat of close to 50 Democratic congressional representatives have said that they will not be attending Prime Minister Netanyahu's address. They're going boycotting it in protest over his handling of the war in Gaza. And as we've mentioned, Vice President Kamala Harris out on the campaign trail. She'll meet Benjamin Netanyahu tomorrow, and also Senator J.D. Vance, the Republican candidate for vice president. He's also out on the campaign trail today, and he will not be in attendance at that. So if we will be covering this, we will be presenting you Benjamin Netanyahu's address live in just a few minutes, so just stay with us. I'd like to thank Ariel Osseron and Bianca Zanini for joining me for the broadcast, and I'd like to thank our viewers, but please do stay with us. Coming up, Benjamin Netanyahu and his joint address to the U.S. Congress here on I-24 News. But thank you for joining us for this broadcast.